Artificial intelligence is remaking marketing as we speak, and if you're a marketer, you can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really, it's a no-brainer. Join Geoff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they explore the latest AI news, trends, tools, and ideas that are creating the future of marketing today. This is No Brainer, an AI podcast for marketers. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, yes, I am an AI. Take it away, Geoff and Greg.
Hey everybody, this is No Brainer, an AI podcast for marketers. I'm Greg Verdino, and I'm here with my good buddy, Geoff Livingston. How are you doing, Geoff?
Hey Greg, how are you? Everything going well?
I'm doing very well, and of course, lots going on in the world of AI since last time we spoke.
Never stops, does it? Oh my Lord.
So let's dive right in. I know you've been watching Adobe and some of the things that they've been doing. We have lots more to discuss as well. So why don't you talk a little bit, let us know, let me know what's going on with Adobe. What have you seen? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so Adobe, for those of you that don't know, launched its version of a generative AI product. It already had a kind of version of that, which was Sensei, and those of you that use Marketo probably saw that a little bit, little inklings of it. And then, of course, they announced Firefly, which is their big image generative technology. And that's quite substantial. I think when you and I talked in our first episode, which is in our historical archives, even though this is our launch episode, if you would, we did talk a little bit about Adobe compared to some of these generative AI ones and why it would probably be a big deal once they entered the market. And of course, we should have known better, right? 3 weeks later, voila, here's Adobe. And as a result of that, now you have a player that's got substantial clienteles in the marketing business, which is why it's relevant for us, that now can create images, generate AI. A couple of differentiators about their product. One, they've sourced their images ethically, probably using Adobe stock, since they already have licensing to all those images through all the photographers there. But also they have video capability with Firefly. And lastly, they've bolted on some of their user interface capabilities, which those of you that are familiar with Photoshop and Illustrator, like straightening angles, cutting and pasting pieces using masks to identify areas that need to be replaced by the generative AI. So tools that professional illustrators, professional photographers, professional videographers have come to accept as normal. And now we haven't seen those before with the generative AI tool set yet. So that's very interesting. So
Awesome.
That's basically it in a nutshell.
So I know I've seen some hands-on reviews. You've seen them as well. That's, kind of, look at that Adobe versus, say, a Midjourney or even a Stable Diffusion or whatever, or a Dolly. And, certainly Adobe is brand new, right? They're taking their first baby steps really in a lot of ways into this world of generative images, right? And it seems like perhaps the quality isn't quite there yet. That might be a function of the fact that they're using a smaller training set, right? Because they're training it on properly licensed video as opposed to the internet's vast storehouse of video, which has its own ethical implications and so forth. Mm-hmm. But of course, they're brand new. At the same time, I'm looking at Adobe, and I'm looking at their marketing cloud, right? Their entire creative cloud, plus of course Marketo and everything else, right? And I'm looking at that cloud, and I'm saying, how can a player like Adobe not become a major force when you're thinking in terms of agencies and client-side marketers who, to your point, are used to these tools, use these tools as their standard tool set, plus don't have to now worry about the IP issues related to the source material, right? So I'm wondering how this plays out as we think about how the market changes now when somebody like Adobe enters the generative AI image creation space.
Yeah. So, first of all, we should note that I'm a photographer, so I have some experience using Adobe tools, and I've done a lot of videography work, and this is definitely my bailiwick, right? and I used some of their, some of their more robust marketing technologies in the past as well. They're, competitor to Pardot, Marketo, what it used to be called. So anyway, long story short, I think there are a few things. One, yes, you're right. They have the user base, and that's what Midjourney doesn't have. That's what Stable Diffusion doesn't have. That may not matter to a younger set of users, and it really comes down to whether or not generative AI becomes a feature set or a dominating type of creation, an accepted form of creation that's used in advertising. Right now, I think you would probably agree with me. I think it's kind of in that phase where I can't use a photo. I don't have a video. I don't really want to invest the money with a graphic designer, so I'll just do something on Midjourney. And it's kind of like that fourth option. So as a result of that, I don't see this very serious yet. It could change. And that definitely seems to be happening with Midjourney 5 being released. The images are a lot better. Adobe's current technology isn't that good. I think it's probably because it's early for them. I think that they're going to catch up quick. They definitely have the money to catch up quick. They definitely have the engineering prowess to do so much faster than a Midjourney or even a Stable Diffusion could. And I think they're probably on par already with OpenAI and DALL-E, which is not very good, in my opinion.
And, when you think about the fact, I know recently Coke introduced their Create the Magic campaign using DALL-E as the basis for image creation. For anyone who's not familiar with that campaign, essentially it's a user-generated content competition, just like the old school days, right? Back in the early days of social, asking consumers to kind of express their creativity using the Coca-Cola brand, essentially improvising around the Coca-Cola brand using a bunch of historical Coke assets, and they're using DALL-E and ChatGPT, the conversational interface to prompt DALL-E to customize these Coke images and create something unique and original-ish, right? But they're using DALL-E, and people are certainly participating in it. And if DALL-E is good enough on the one hand for the world's biggest CPG, I would imagine for other brands, short of some of the weirdness that you might get in terms of kludgy images and six-fingered hands and all that kind of stuff, I would imagine. Right. I would imagine you still get right in Midjourney, right? But I would imagine that you're going to see some brands find this to be an easy on-ramp without any of the significant legal implications that might concern a big brand over piracy or whatever, and really kind of use this as their on-ramp into generative content creation.
Spot on, right? Like, one, I don't have to create a new license. I just bolt it onto my existing license. 2, I don't have to worry about legal issues. 3, the user interface my designers already know how to use. Of course, there's a Discord community because I think Adobe wanted to look like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, but I don't even know if they needed that, and that's going to make it a lot easier. And then 4, it's going to integrate into Illustrator and Photoshop, which makes it immensely more usable than those apps are. And I think when you consider I think the best analogy in the software world, maybe Microsoft, right? In the sense of the way they put together teams with all their disparate apps and like SharePoint and Skype and Word, and they created the killer product, right? Making all these tools accessible to you in one place and making them work really well together. And it looks like Adobe's doing that already, and they have been doing it with their Creative Cloud, bringing this in there so that it makes generative AI not this standalone, unique unicorn. It makes it just part of the creative function within an organization and allows people to create imagery much faster, quicker, cheaper, which is the same thing that ChatGPT integrations do. One thing I did want to add, though, on your remarks about DALL-E, the only reason why DALL-E is even relevant is because of ChatGPT, in my opinion. I think if it was standalone, it'd be basically floundering on the floor. That's the only reason it's still around, and OpenAI is bundling it in. If they didn't have that suite, it would be gone.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think a lot of this really gets down to whether it's happening at, say, a startup-ish organization like an OpenAI or an existing incumbent, whether that's an Adobe or a Microsoft or a Google or a Salesforce or HubSpot, right? Is this idea of how these software companies, these technology companies are bundling multiple solutions together to make it easy to essentially implement a one-stop shop marketing cloud for a lot of organizations, but also the way they're pulling AI in and making it a feature of an existing product set. Right over the course of our last few episodes, our stealth pilots, we spoke about HubSpot, we spoke about Salesforce, we've spoken a bit about the productivity suites, Microsoft Office and Google Workspace, and the way, certainly, as anybody who's been following the AI space, these 800-pound gorillas in their respective areas have essentially taken AI on board and made it part of the feature set, right? It's no longer a standalone solution. And it has me thinking about this sort of, kind of almost like this dichotomy that's developing. It is so early in generative AI, but still all of the energy is kind of rising to the largest incumbent players that have been, kind of almost the, practically monopolizing the digital age, right? Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, et cetera, right? These huge companies have made AI a feature, and they, in some ways, become the easy and obvious choice. And I wonder what happens in a scenario like that with all of the startup innovation. There are dozens of AI writers, right? AI writing assistant applications. How does an AI writing assistant application, for example, thrive in a world where you can write directly inside your CRM in the case of Salesforce, or directly in your word processor in the case of like Docs or Microsoft Word? So what are your thoughts on some of that?
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I think we have too many startups, and we've seen this before. No big secret with the social media age, where you and I cut our teeth on as internet personalities, so to speak, internet nano personalities, internet wannabe nano personalities. I don't know. So, but the truth of the matter is,
describe myself as a Z-list blogger with A-list attitude.
Right. Yeah. We had our little moment in the sun as panelists at South by Southwest or something. Right. So, I think the real deal, though, with this is that we're looking at probably some serious collapses, some consolidation, some mercy kills, probably. And this is similar to with social networking. We had like Pounce and all these other ones that started up that just got a lot of hype and then died very quickly. I think we're going to see that. It has to happen. I think right now we're probably in that phase of another 3 to 6 months before that starts to happen. I mean, the other compounding factor is completely unrelated to AI. It has to do with the venture market and the financial markets and the way the banks are working right now and all the uncertainty. It's not really a great time to be a startup. It's not really a great time to get a seed round or another round. So I think that's also going to help kill off some of these. And I think we need to see it happen. The other thing that's interesting, too, that you brought up, which was OpenAI. And I don't know if I consider OpenAI to be a startup anymore, only because they're half owned by Microsoft. They're like almost too big to fail. And I look forward, I know we're going to talk a little further about integrations in the ChatGPT. I do have some thoughts about that in the sense of what happens with OpenAI and ChatGPT and search and all that stuff. So it's interesting, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on all these crazy bazillion a new AI every moment announcements?
Yeah, I would agree with you, right? There are far too many companies that seem to be playing to too many edge cases in a lot of instances, right? Like we are the right AI tool for this one really specific application in one really specific market, which can be great. Niche can be amazing, but it just seems that it would be very difficult to compete against a Microsoft or a Google and I know Google is behind in a lot of ways, but I wouldn't count them out yet, right?
Right.
Competing against a Microsoft, a Google, a Salesforce, a HubSpot, an OpenAI, and you're right. I mean, compared to a Microsoft, and OpenAI is a startup, but with 10 billion, 12 billion Microsoft dollars in the company, 49% ownership, right? That sweet Microsoft money. Clearly, they're not playing with startup stakes anymore, and that's how they've been able to clearly so quickly accelerate their traction and essentially create an ownership position in the market. And that's going to, I'm sure, be a recurring theme throughout this entire series is, hey, what did OpenAI do yesterday and today and tomorrow, right? Because it's every day they're announcing something new and different. I suspect what happens, at least in the case of marketing, I don't want to prognosticate about every possible application for generative AI, or even, and generative AI is not the only form of AI, obviously. There's plenty of other AI tool sets and applications and use cases and models and things that are not specifically generative AI. But I would imagine in the generative space in particular, I would not be surprised to see most organizations figure, well, we can do 80 to 90% of what we want to do if we leverage the features that have been baked into our existing marketing stack tool set. We're not going to sign another contract or bring on and onboard another vendor and train our team on how to use some new technology. We're going to expect them to make the most of the technology baked into our existing marketing stack, whether it's Creative Cloud or Marketing Cloud or Salesforce's tool set or whatever. And I would expect that might be good for 80 to 90% of the use cases. And then maybe the other 10 or 20%, there might be some startup cream that rises to the top that actually do either have a unique application or feature set that allows them to be the best in class at exactly what they do. Or you do, of course, have that sort of, I would say it's the exception rather than the rule in my experience. The marketer who really, the marketing ops person who really wants to build their own custom stack by piecing together all of these best-in-class pieces, and will kind of, have 50 different pieces of technology from 45 different vendors because they don't want to settle for good enough in sort of a one-stop solution. So I think there's maybe some sort of edge opportunity for some of these startups, but not for 200 startups, right? I think there will be a relatively small number, and they'll end up becoming the next set of unicorns, right? The AI unicorns that are not OpenAI, but are, kind of coming up through venture capital, let's say now, who become accepted as common tools in the marketing tool suite.
Yeah, I think too, and this is where my experience, so I'm the vice president of marketing at eValueServe, you know this, but we do a lot of industry specific AI implementations. And so this is where I kind of feel like I look at all these unicorns and I see basically a lot of people trying to solve for very basic problems that may not actually matter to larger businesses or even smaller and medium enterprises, right? I mean, how many different writing solutions do I need? I already have Grammarly. Okay, so what are you going to do that's different than Grammarly? Oh, Grammarly's got one too. Okay, is this really going to be better? That kind of thinking, right? So when I hear people talking about ChatGPT for that, maybe there's one or two options that might be different. Maybe it's copy AI, gets better, who knows? But all 25 of them, there's no way. And a lot of these generative AI players haven't been really thoughtful about their use cases and how they matter to larger businesses. They're very consumer oriented. They're very focused on individuals and how they might use the system and not how an enterprise would. When I think about how an enterprise would, one of our generative AI use cases, and I'm kind of, I can't talk about this because we have talked about it publicly. We have an RFP generator where it basically sources a company's prior RFP responses. And if you're dealing with massive RFPs, that's a big deal, right? That takes a lot of time. You're dealing with a 60-page document. You have to analyze all the different regulatory environments that maybe something applies to. Well, if you have to answer the same questions or similar questions over and over and over again, that's a very rote task. It's very time consuming. And your ability to get through those tasks directly affects your ability to reply to more of them, right? And if you're in the RFP game, it can be a volume game, especially if you have good relationship builders. So having generative AI pre-populate a lot of those RFP responses and then having the business development team review that, or the operations team or the account team review those responses and then tweak them and hone them to the specific implementation, that's useful. That's particularly useful when you're dealing with 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure contracts, right? Now you're talking about something that may have a very niche use that businesses want. And I think what people are not thinking about with this, and I'm sorry, I know I'm ranting now. I can tell I'm on fire. But you have a lot of chief data officers and companies or directors of data analytics and VPs of data analytics that are reporting to the CMO. They're reporting to the operations team, and their whole job is to create efficiencies and make everything better, right? Like when we were talking about Kia, right? Who do you think hired OpenAI to do this ChatGPT integration into their Salesforce? It was the sales team. They had to, and the chief data officer was probably involved in that. And this was a very custom implementation. Nobody else is going to have this implementation, right? I think that's where generative AI blows up, is when all the chief data officers match it up to a high dollar use case within their organization. They say, we need that capability with our machine learning and maybe our computer vision, which recognizes all of our documents, so that it can spit out all these answers and make it very easy for our customers to access our system. Whatever it might be, those are the uses for generative AI that people aren't talking about.
Yeah, and I think what I'm, as I'm listening to you, and you weren't ranting, you were in fact on fire, is that I'm hearing two things, right? One is that, the use case you described, number one, is strategic. And I've been talking a bunch about this. I've blogged about this. I know you share my point of view on this, that, we need to very quickly, as marketers, move out of shiny object stage, right? And, get over that shiny object syndrome and really start to think about what are the strategic applications of these technologies to our business. Certainly, and the ability to respond to a 6, 7, or 8-figure RFP more effectively and more efficiently is a strategic use case, right? So that's about optimizing the business using a tool that's ready-made for that kind of optimization. In other instances, it might be ways in which AI can help us to reimagine the business, right? But in either case, it's about finding the right strategic use cases and applying the technology in a way that allows us to accelerate our progress towards achieving those use cases or that strategy. And I think the second thing I'm hearing is, looking at workflows and where workflows have built-in pain points. And, I own an agency now. I've worked at big agencies. You've been in and out of agencies in addition to being client side. I've worked in sales teams at technology companies. Just the workflow challenge of trying to find the 7 RFPs that the organization responded to over the last 18 months that have relevant building blocks that I can use to respond to my next RFP is such a nightmare, right? So you're describing a workflow problem, or I'm describing a workflow problem to which you've just described the workflow solution. So really thinking about how, number one, that these technologies fit with your strategy. How do they help you achieve your strategy? But also, how do they help you accomplish your workflow? Even if the workflow is relatively simple, right? Like, the workflow for a content marketing department, I'm going to be very reductive here. I know it is much more complex than this, but, how does this help me write better quality content more effectively, more efficiently, right? Not how can I, churn out a bunch of garbage because this is really cool and shiny, and I like the fact that I can prompt something and end up with something, I would say, fast. I don't want to say good, but...
Well, it also gets to your point too that generative AI is not the only game in town when it comes to AI. In fact, it's just an algorithm type that creates content, like, for example, a chatbot that recycles answers and spits it out in a different way, or cued to spit it out in a voice or some other method, right? But it often works with other algorithms in the background, and it's really part of a larger language model
Yeah,
approach to AI.
yeah.
And so
And
when we
even
consider
beyond,
that,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say beyond language models, I mean, for years now, I mean, this is kind of the irony of this sort of generative AI moment is that for years and years and years, right, AI has been baked into the algorithms that are driving our search buys, our ad targeting. We've been using it for big data analytics. We've been using it for social listening, for sentiment analysis, but it's been kind of ticking along in the background. You didn't have to even know it was AI. You just needed to know how to interpret the results of, let's say, sentiment analysis. Unless you were building a platform. If somebody was selling you the platform, they might tell you AI was running in the background, but you didn't really touch the AI the same way you do now. But in a way, generative AI has become so much of the focus right now, and I think for many warranted reasons. But at the same time, we forget the fact that we're surrounded by living and breathing, so to speak. I mean, I don't want to anthropomorphize it, but, working AI, right? We've had working AI in our businesses, in our lives, whether it's Siri and Alexa, and, the fact that the car knows when to pump the brakes if you're not paying attention, right? All of this stuff is already deployed, but, it kind of fades into the background and ceases to be magic, as I guess the saying goes, right? And I
Well,
think,
yeah, it's the chat box analogy, right? The response, the social media whole comment box where people can say something back to you. It's like, oh my God, people can talk back. Oh my God, I slapped on a GPT implementation and now I can get my answers verbalized to me. Okay.
yeah. So why don't we move on, since we've mentioned chat and we've mentioned GPT, which leads us to, of course,
Chat
ChatGPT.
GPT.
The other thing, certainly, I've been watching over the course of the past week or two, as OpenAI announced it, was the integration of what they're calling plugins into ChatGPT. So we've spoken over the course of the last few episodes, obviously, about other companies integrating large language models or GPT technology into their tool sets, right? The Salesforce, the HubSpot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Adobe, as we were discussing earlier. So this announcement by OpenAI kind of flips it on its head. Instead of putting GPT into your app, it's bringing your app into GPT. Right. So what they announced, essentially, for anybody who hasn't followed the news, is that really three main things, the way I look at it. The sort of bringing some third-party plugins into ChatGPT, where these third-party plugins will provide access to new data sets and functionality inside the chat box. And I'm saying that with an X. It is the bot, of course, but also in the box, in the actual browser frame where you're doing your chat. And a dozen or so partners have already been announced, kind of nerdy things like Wolfram and Zapier, but also consumer brands like Kayak, OpenTable, Instacart. So it's this idea of bringing these services into the chatbot and making them conversational. And the example I know that ChatGPT shared was, or one of the examples they shared for this was the idea of, asking the chatbot for a recipe, which of course is easy. A lot of people have tried that. And if you have the, let's say, Instacart plugin installed into your ChatGPT, it will not only provide you with a recipe, but it can create the shopping list and populate that shopping list into your Instacart, making it easier. So it's not just answering you, it's actually taking action for you in a way. So this was one of the implications, or one of the things that they announced relative to plugins. The second thing was and this is, kind of to address one of the Achilles heels of large language models in general and ChatGPT in particular. They have now they're introducing their own web browser plugin. So now all of a sudden, ChatGPT can in fact browse the web, which is something it hadn't been able to do before. How well it will do that, we're going to see when this becomes more commercially available. But certainly that is a functionality increase, an improvement that I know a lot of people have been looking for. And then, of course, whether they're third-party apps or the first-party apps like web browsing, and there are a couple of others as well, ChatGPT users are going to start to have access to this. It'll start to roll out into the ChatGPT Plus community, but also the broader implication is that if you're a brand or a developer, you can access this. You can basically build your own plugins using the API. And I think there are some big implications there, because in my mind, this is almost like an iPhone App Store kind of moment, right? If OpenAI is Apple and ChatGPT is the iPhone, this is now the App Store moment where all of these different brands, media companies, whatever, can start to create these little chunks of functionality that live inside the chat. And the chat becomes much more full-featured and a place to accomplish so many more things and access so many more data sets than you could have done otherwise. So I think this is actually a pretty big moment, but I'd love to hear some of your perspectives in terms of what you think this might mean and where you think it might go.
Yeah, I think you're spot on that it's a big moment, and the strategy is clearly to what I would say, capitalize and build dominance, right? Whether that's the Amazon, we are the store for everything model, or the Apple Store, we are the thing for all apps, mobile, or Google, we are the thing for all search. I do liken it much more to search because it seems to be how people interface with it. And when I hear about like the Kayak implementation and the Open Table implementation, I think of paid ads. If I want my data sourced, then I need to pay for that, pardon me. And with that in mind, I think it just strikes me like they are becoming search. They're basically, well, the old search engine doesn't work, so we're going to beat this up. We're going to go this way. We're going to make our stuff much more responsive. We're going to start getting factual information from vendors. We're going to become much more of a competitor to Google in a lot of ways. And if you think about the botched Bing launch and how they did it, I think OpenAI is basically saying, well, let us do it. We will do it. We will become the next generation of search. And then Microsoft will buy it. And I actually think Google's got to be freaking out. They have to be freaking out when they see this, because those are dollars they're losing, right? Those are dollars they're losing on AdWords. Those are dollars that they're losing in other places as well. Another thing to keep in mind, what's the best way to say this? Like when I think about how ChatGPT is building on a search, again, it's like we want to take over Google Chrome again, like we want to track you. And what they've done is basically realize they have a moment. They understand they're ahead. They're in first. They have blue ocean in front of them going to the strategy approach, right? And they're forging ahead and they're pushing everybody behind them. And I think it's brilliant, and clearly they're using that money that they got from Microsoft to accelerate very, very quickly. And they're 100% right to do it. They've learned the lessons from other tech companies, and I think they're going to crush everybody as a result of it if they keep this up. I mean, it does take one big gaffe or two for them to fall down, but so far they've been really smart about their messaging as well. They're in front of a lot of the crises by saying like, hey, this is an experiment. We're really trying to evolve. Yeah, we're not, even with ChatGPT 4, every time you ask a question, well, my data set's not complete. Well, I can't definitively tell you what this answer is, but let me give you a guess, right? Or let me give you what I think, or whatever it might be. Very well programmed, very, very smart app. I think if people aren't using ChatGPT 4 Plus and you're in this business and you think generative AI is serious, you're nuts, man. I mean, cancel the HBO Max subscription. cancel the fifth network, whatever it is, and take that money and put it into ChatGPT Plus, because the more knowledgeable you get with it, the more understanding you'll be of like how this actually works from a native interface standpoint. That's my take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of building on your idea of chat or conversational AI as the new search, which is clearly what we've seen happening with, with Bard, with Bing, and so on and so forth. But now kind of bringing it, not putting AI into the search, but now putting search into AI effectively. It also does, though, in a lot of ways, kind of bring us back to so many of the fundamentals, right? What made search work? Right, it was good, high quality, authoritative content, and if people are not going to the web looking for good, authoritative, high quality content, I think many marketers might kind of feel like, okay, we can take the foot off the pedal a little bit and not focus so much on content creation, or take the cheap out and use ChatGPT itself for content creation, which has all sorts of pitfalls. But this almost says, not so fast, right? Because now with the chat box calling out to the web through this browser plugin, it becomes all the more important that you have good, high quality content that is considered authoritative by the bot. At the same time, if you're a media company, and there are pros and cons to this, because we've seen this happen with, Facebook becoming the interface layer between the consumer and the content, which hurt a lot of media companies and cost media companies and brands tons of money effectively to buy back your own audience. But
and then, the betrayal, right? Like, now you have to pay. Thanks, Zuck. Thank you.
Exactly. But the same kind of thing is happening here now, right? So if you're, I don't know, New York Times, and you launch a plugin, and that plugin is now being used to query ChatGPT for the news, today's news, and you're 3.5 hours away, as you are from me, in Washington, D.C., but you work for the Washington Post and you're behind them in your development cycle, that's another one of those moments where you're like, well, wait a second, did I just lose my runway to become a definitive source for people who are interfacing with the web by chat? And I think it's go ahead.
Yeah. No, I want to add something on the New York Times thing. And like, how in bed is the New York Times with OpenAI right now? It's just shocking. It's shocking. Like, this week, they have an entire series on how to use ChatGPT and become an AI expert. Like, you're teaching a bunch of intellectual New Yorkers and people across the country that you could be an AI expert by learning how to master ChatGPT. No. You can become a ChatGPT expert, but you are not an AI expert, okay, New York Times? And then the whole interview they had with Sam Altman, and like they were like crushing on the whole launch with Bing. I mean, it's shocking. It's almost like, I don't know, maybe like they're taking these reporters out to lunch or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
Something. They own them.
Is that a thing? Is there such an industry as public relations that works with media companies? Is there, the other thing I think of, if I'm a brand, right, and I'm, and again, it's the same thing. If I'm Instacart, great. If I'm Peapod, I'm scratching my head right now, right? Or if I'm, Expedia or Kayak, great, I'm in there. But if I'm Travelocity, well, wait a second, did I miss a boat, right? So I think we're going to start to see sort of as the API becomes available and more organizations are able to write their plugins. And I don't know how good these first generation plugins are or not, right? They're, I think, just making basic API calls. One day those plugins will actually interface with the organization's own LLM, let's say, right? So they'll become more and more sophisticated. But regardless, I think we're about to see a gold rush. The same way every organization built their Facebook app, every brand had an iPhone app or a Samsung app or whatever, right? I think we almost have to see a gold rush where every brand is vying to become the preferred plugin in their category for the ChatGPT user base. And I think it's going to get really interesting. And a lot of agencies are probably going to make a lot of money selling selling development services for plugin development. But I think it's going to get really interesting really fast.
And the other aspect of it too is ChatGPT needs to expand its user base rapidly, right? They have to get as many users as they can so they become dominant. And one of the things that these companies are doing when they make these big announcements and tell all their users now involved with ChatGPT, the more consumers see ChatGPT for all this information, the more likely they are to go to use the interface. So it's kind of like this evolving hype cycle where you're driving more and more users through these brands and their customers to that interface. So I think it's just working all in favor of ChatGPT. They're playing a perfect chess game. It's really brilliant marketing.
I mean,
we should do an entire episode on how OpenAI dominated the world, right?
Exactly. Like, we could do an entire episode on how masterful ChatGPT is, or OpenAI more properly is, at marketing. Right. It's almost like they're writing a playbook for how to market in the modern age, because they've got, tremendous, they're making all the right moves. They've got, tremendous positive word of mouth. They've got evangelists all over the place. And there's, pros and cons to some of this. Right. We've got all these sort of YouTube get rich quick schemers, and all that stuff happening. But, just like happened with crypto and Web3 stuff and NFTs and whatnot, the metaverse. But at the same time, you can hardly have a conversation, at least inside our bubble of marketers and people who are interested in technology. You cannot have a conversation without ChatGPT or OpenAI kind of nosing their way in a lot of ways. It's like the I don't know. It's almost like the I want my MTV of the AI age, right? Where everyone just just comes right out of your mouth. Like, I want my MTV. I want my ChatGPT. Like, it's brilliant. Right?
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting times. So we've discussed a lot. We've covered a lot of ground. So I think it's probably time for the brainer. I mean, I would almost hesitate to pick one thing that jumped out at me as the big insight. So I'm going to ask you to do it.
That's good. Whatever one of us says is insightful, as you would say. But I think what we really kind of honed in on towards the end of the whole Adobe generative AI chat, it's how you use it, right? Like, what's your business case for this? Let's chill out a little bit. Be the strategic thinker within the organization. We know it's an important technology. How can you use it to better your business, interface with your customers, attract more of them, and make them more loyal to you? And if you can find that use case, then that's great. If you're just looking into ChatGPT and be like, wow, we can replace 2 of our writers with this. Okay, that's great. So you're going to throw out a lot of bad content, and how's that going to impact your brand? Get bigger, think smarter, make this useful, make it more valuable, help your team out, help your business out, make more money.
Awesome. And I guess that leads us to our no-brainer. And here, I think, we've spoken about how, even just a little while ago, you said, hey, cancel that 5th cable network subscription and put your $20 a month or whatever it is into ChatGPT Plus. And that's sort of the easy and obvious thing. But because there's so much noise around OpenAI and ChatGPT, I think there might be a tendency to think it's the only game in town, or to only try that. And of course, there are many, many different large language models, and different, conversational interfaces for them. We've spoken about Bard a little bit, right? We've mentioned Bard at least. That's Google's answer to ChatGPT, which is now finally available, kind of coming off waitlist, being made available to people who have kind of real Gmail accounts, which many people do. We'll say, in all honesty, it is not fantastic. They are way behind. The model is not nearly as sophisticated. It's not as natural. It's not hitting on all cylinders yet. But I think if you're a marketer, you would be remiss not to at least see what Bard is all about and compare the two models to one another, compare the experiences to each other to get a sense of how different models work and how they respond to the same kinds of prompts. And to that end, I don't know if people are familiar with a service called Poe.com, P-O-E, like the poet, that is a Quora product. It was originally only available for mobile, but now it is available on a desktop at Poe.com. And what that does is it allows you to choose from among, I think it's 7 or 8 different large language models. They include GPT 3.5 in its sort of ChatGPT iteration, a couple of prior versions of GPT-3, which are potentially more powerful in terms of the number of parameters. Also GPT-4. Also, a couple of models from Anthropic, which is another developer of language models. So it allows you to kind of pick and choose, and it tells you actually in the interface what the pros and cons are. This one is faster but less accurate. That one is more accurate but a little bit slower. This one has a greater limit versus a lesser limit. This one might be more creative in its responses than another, right? So you can kind of pick and choose and give your prompt to all of them, really, and see how these different models respond, because I think you'll start to get a sense, as there is perhaps over time more competition in the conversational AIs that are available to us through a wide variety of different interfaces, you'll start to get a sense of how each of them is in fact a little bit different and brings strengths or weaknesses to the table. So that's Poe.com. If you're interested in trying out Bard, I believe it's bard.google.com, and we will have these links in our show notes. But that would be the no-brainer, is to experiment and play to the extent that you want to be smart and strategic with your corporate time and money. I think from a personal perspective, it's incumbent upon all of us as business people and as consumers to play with these things and see what it feels like to play with them firsthand. You get a lot of real interesting learning, I think, that way. And I think that brings us pretty much to the end of our show. Do you want to bring us out to the end, my friend?
The big finish. Well, first of all, thanks for another good episode, good conversation today. So you can find us on YouTube. You can find us in all the usual places: Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, all those places, And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to give us a good rating. Finally, last but not least, check us out at nobrainerpodcast.com, where you can also drop us an email if you have questions or suggestions, or would like to cover a topic, anything, any ideas. You want to give us feedback, tell us how crazy we are. I think I hear that every day. I sit down at dinner with my family, but you can join the chorus. But whatever it is, have a great day, stay safe, and keep checking out these different generative tools. We look forward to hearing from you. Peace out. Have a great day.